Imagine a winter night so cold that warmth wasn't something your house had, it was something you chased. You slept inches from fire, trusted hot stones with your life, and measured comfort by how close you dared to stand. Before central heating, staying warm was survival, ingenuity, and daily risk all rolled into one. Imagine waking up on a winter morning when the house itself feels frozen solid. The floorboards bite at your feet, your breath fogs the air, and the only place that feels remotely alive is the kitchen. Not because it's cozy, but because fire lives there. Before modern heating, warmth wasn't evenly distributed. It was hunted, guarded, and rationed. The open hearth fireplace was once the heart of the home. These weren't decorative features meant to look charming in photographs. They were massive mouths of brick and stone, fed constantly with wood, day and night, just to keep the cold from winning. Flames crackled endlessly, yet most of that hard-earned heat vanished straight up the chimney. Cold air rushed back in to replace it, sneaking through gaps in walls and windows. Families learned quickly where to sit. Too far from the fire and your fingers went numb. Too close and your clothes scorched. People gathered in what was called the keeping room, turning their bodies like rotisseries, roasting on one side while freezing on the other. Furniture evolved to fight the cold. High-backed settles wrapped around the fire to trap warmth. Heavy benches blocked drafts. Cooking happened directly over the flames. Iron pots swinging on metal arms, sparks jumping as meals were prepared. It was smoky, exhausting, and dangerous. Chimney fires were common, burns were expected. Yet this was life, and winter meant constant labor just to stay alive. As technology crept forward, the potbelly stove took over single rooms with its unmistakable shape. Bulging cast iron, glowing from within, it radiated heat more efficiently than an open fire ever could. You'd find one in schoolhouses, general stores, and train depots. The wide belly slowed airflow, squeezing every bit of heat from coal or wood. Its flat top doubled as a warming station for kettles and coffee pots. Someone always had to tend it, feeding fuel, shaking ashes, keeping the fire alive. These stoves created social gravity. People clustered around them instinctively. In small towns, men gathered at the general store, leaning in close, talking politics, playing games, sharing rumors. Step 10 feet away, though, and the cold reclaimed you. Comfort existed in a circle, and everyone knew its boundaries. As homes grew taller and cities denser, heat had to travel farther than a single room. That's when cast iron radiators took over, lining the walls of apartment buildings and grand Victorian houses. These heavy, ribbed giants didn't just heat the air, they stored heat, releasing it slowly, long after the boiler had fired. When steam rushed in for the first time each fall, it announced itself loudly. Pipes clanged, valves hissed, dust burned off hot metal filling rooms with a smell that meant winter had officially arrived. Some radiators were intentionally oversized, and fear played a role in that choice. During the influenza pandemic of 1918, fresh air was believed to be the best defense against sickness. Windows were kept open even in freezing weather. So engineers, compensated by installing radiators powerful enough to fight the cold head-on. A century later, many of those same apartments are still unbearably hot, even with snow piling up outside. But for most families, bedrooms remained unheated territory. Upstairs, rooms often matched the outdoor temperature, turning bedtime into an act of courage. To survive the night, people warmed the bed itself. Brass and copper bed warmers were filled with glowing coals and slid carefully between the sheets. They had to be moved constantly to avoid burning fabric or starting fires. Safer households relied on soapstones, thick slabs heated on the stove and wrapped in cloth. Once tucked into bed, they radiated warmth for hours, sometimes until morning. The goal wasn't heating the room, it was heating the person. Eventually, coal technology tried to modernize itself. The coal stoker arrived as a promise of convenience. Instead of shoveling coal by hand several times a day, homeowners let a mechanical auger feed fuel into the furnace automatically. Thermostats entered the picture, offering a glimpse of controlled comfort. Still, coal fought back. Clinkers formed in the firebox, stubborn chunks of waste that had to be pried out manually. Basements housed coal rooms, dark and dusty spaces with metal chutes, where delivery trucks dumped thousands of pounds of fuel in deafening cascades. It was progress, but it was still dirty, loud, and exhausting. In rural homes, the wood cook stove ruled everything. Cooking, heating, drying clothes, and warming water all depended on it. Cast iron bodies gleamed with nickel trim, but operating one required skill. Dampers and flues had to be adjusted constantly. Too much heat ruined dinner. Too little left the house cold. In winter, life revolved around the kitchen because it was the only reliably warm space. Children studied there. Clothes dried nearby. Water stayed hot in side-mounted reservoirs. Summer, however, turned the same stove into a monster, baking kitchens during canning season with no escape. For many families, the biggest leap forward came with oil heat. When coal finally lost its grip, oil furnaces felt like the future. No shoveling, no ash buckets, just a massive steel tank squatting in the basement, waiting to be filled. The arrival of the oil truck became a seasonal ritual. A heavy hose dragged across frozen lawns. The whistle of the vent pipe screaming as the tank filled. Inside, the furnace answered the thermostat with a deep whoosh. A low rumble that vibrated through the house. There was always that faint smell of heating oil in the basement, a scent that quietly meant safety, warmth, and winter survival. But even with furnaces, heat didn't move easily through old homes. Rooms were small for a reason. Doorways were sealed with thick portieres, heavy curtains of velvet or brocade that blocked drafts and trapped warmth. By closing them, families could turn a single parlor into a refuge, a fabric-lined shelter against the cold. These curtains weren't decorative. They were barriers in a constant battle against heat loss, and for a time, they worked beautifully. In many early 20th century homes, heat rose through a single, massive floor register. Set directly above the furnace, it allowed warm air to drift upward by gravity alone. On cold mornings, everyone competed for space around it. Children inflated pajamas with hot air. Socks dried on the metal grate. Pets claimed it as prime territory. The register became a gathering point, but it came with an unintended cost. Sound traveled through it just as easily as heat. Conversations downstairs carried straight into upstairs bedrooms, making privacy almost impossible. Portable kerosene heaters filled the gaps where permanent systems failed. Enamel bodies, glass windows, visible flames. They brought heat exactly where it was needed, especially in rural homes without electricity. But they demanded constant refilling and filled rooms with an oily smell that soaked into clothes and furniture. Tip one over, and fire followed. Without ventilation, the air itself became dangerous. Still, for many families, they were the difference between freezing and sleeping. All of these methods shared one truth: heat was never guaranteed. It required effort, planning, and daily attention. Staying warm meant working with fire, stone, iron, and fuel, accepting discomfort as normal. Central heating didn't just change temperature. It changed how homes were built, how families gathered, and how winter felt. Before it arrived, warmth wasn't something you set. It was something you earned.